it's Kelly, and I am here with a video for W+9. Today is day 1 of our February 2016 release week, and I am going to be using the Beautiful Bouquets Ranunculus. Absolutely fell in love with the set, and it is sized to carry your whole card. It's large enough to be a focal point for your whole card. I wanted to use it a little bit differently today. So I went ahead and got out my Misty, and I'm going to be stamping my sentiment first. I am using W+9 Pure Color Black ink. This is my favorite ink to stamp sentiments in. It's super crisp. In fact, this is the first time I've used it, and I only had to stamp it once. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to use the stamp, parts of the stamp, to create like a floral border on the right-hand side of my card. And I'm using the Misty because it's just... for me, it's easier. I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black ink because it's Copic friendly and I'm going to be coloring with Copics. But here, it's just such a large stamp. I just didn't get good coverage. And that's why I chose to use the Misty so I could stamp it a second time and it would stamp right on top of the other one. And it's no problem at all. So in between each stamping, I'm going to go ahead and clean up my stamp because I am going to be moving it around. And then I just make sure it's dry before I put it back on my paper again. And then just kind of, I wanted the sentiment to be framed by the flowers. So I was just kind of toying around and messing with it to see what was going to work best for the layout that I wanted. I wanted it to be full, but I didn't want to have to take the time to mask anything. It's kind of being a little bit lazy. This stamp is pretty intricate and I didn't want to have to cut around it. So once I found a good position, then I just went ahead and inked up the portion of the stamp that I'd actually be stamping and put that down. And then after this, I stamped it one more time on the bottom, and I did that by moving my paper up to the top left-hand corner and letting the stamp hang off the bottom edge. And again, I just inked up the portion that I needed. I didn't ink up the whole thing. And yeah, we were good to go. And then to start the Copic coloring. So there is quite a bit here, and what I decided to do was just kind of show you one bit of each part. So when I was thinking about the color combination that I wanted to use, I actually just got on Google, or you could use Pinterest, and I started looking for winter color combinations. And what I came across was one that was peach, navy, and white, and I really, really liked it. So that's how I picked my color combination. I'm going to do this large flower white. I opted to use the warm grays to do this. And the way that ranunculuses are shaped is, ranunculuses, is that what I said? I don't even know. Anyway, they are very tight. The petals are very tight to one another. So when I'm doing my shading, I'm not doing a ton of shading. I'm more or less just outlining the areas in which there would be shading. And my preference is to start with my lightest color and then work out to my darkest. I won't lie to you, sometimes when I'm doing tighter designs, I don't do 2 layers of color because I get really nervous about it bleeding and me losing my highlight. I didn't have a problem with doing 2 layers with this one, but if you find that you are, then you don't need to. Like, you don't need to get a good blend. It's just the look that I prefer, to go from lightest to darkest and darkest to lightest. But if you're maybe a little more heavy-handed or your markers are super juicy, just whatever is going to work for you, you don't have to do it exactly like I do. Do it how you do, and it'll still be pretty, I promise. So I had laid down my shadows with my lightest color, and now I'm going to go in with the W3 and then just start building from there. It doesn't, you want to go with the shape of the petal. I try not to be too heavy-handed, in the smaller areas. Maybe just adding like a touch to the base of the petal where it's really tucked into the one before it. And with a white flower like this one is, you always want to make sure you are leaving some white at the tips. Your white paper should be your highlight. There shouldn't be any pigment on it from your markers. And that's just because when you're coloring white, all you're adding in is the shadows. And you don't want a gray flower. So that's why you need those white highlights. if things get a little out of hand and you start to lose your white highlight in some areas, don't pitch it just yet, because sometimes you can go back in with like a white gel pen and fix that, or you can go in with your colorless blender and fix it. So for this flower, I went as dark as a W7, and I'm only adding the W7 in what is going to be the deepest, darkest parts of the flower, and even then I'm really only adding a touch of it. I'm not doing huge bold lines of it, because this is a white flower, not a gray flower, like I said before. So just keep, it really is a practice makes perfect kind of thing, and I'm all about the practice. So here you could just, I've seen several people color, and it just depends on what your preference is, where they have, darker shadows and leave a lot of white area. I don't prefer to do that, but I do think I can see why people are drawn to it. For my next layer of color, when I work out from my darkest to my lightest, I'm going to be adding a little more shading than I did before. And that's really only on the outer petals, because they're really the only ones large enough to carry it. So with the ones in the middle, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just doing the lines of colors, but because we're putting color on top of color, it's going to bleed out more than it did before. So even though it looks like we're just doing the same thing over and over again, it's not like, I don't know, like a ballpoint pen, where if you just keep making the same line on top of the same line, it's only going to get slightly darker, because they're alcohol markers and they absorb into the paper, and that's where they mix. They do spread quite a bit more. And then, I will go back in with my my lightest color, still trying to make sure I leave that, little bit of white highlight. And now, if you've watched my videos before, you've heard me say it still looks gray, and it's because everything that it's next to is stark white. So because we've added in the shading, it looks super gray. So I went ahead and colored in everything else that was going to be white, and then I'm going to do the peach. Picking a color combination for the peach was very interesting for me, because you can go like a pinky peach, you can go more red, or orange. I opted to go a little more brown, and it's just that the brown, the E that I chose is, what's it called? I think it's called suntan, and it does have some orangish undertones, but I just felt like that's what gave me the best depth for the other colors that I had chose. But again, work with what you have. If you, play around on a scrap piece of paper, that's what I did. I scribbled out all my colors on a scrap piece of paper and then found the ones that I really liked. And I did both sets of berries, the peach color, and then I'm going to do this smaller ranunculus, the same peach color, just to get in a little bit more pop of color. There's a lot of really beautiful greenery in this stamp set. So I wanted to make sure that I was balancing that greenery with enough color, with enough of the flower colors, so that it wasn't just all green. And that's just because of how I chose to use this stamp, with it hanging off the side. When you stamp it as a full focal point, everything's balanced, because Dawn has drawn just a beautiful bouquet. She's good for that. Tell her, do more. So here I'm just doing the same thing. I'm just using very light lines of color, because it's a very, tight design, and I want to, try to conserve that highlight. So I'm going out to my darkest and then back into my lightest. And then the second time around, I'm adding in a little bit more shading than I did the time before. And again, if it seems like it's getting a little out of control for you, then just do the one layer of color until you feel more comfortable. Or maybe you just think the one layer is, that's the best look for you. Then do that. That's totally okay. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just what your preference is. So I'm, again, just going to hit it with my lightest color. And this time I am filling it all in, because I'm not trying to leave a white highlight. I want my highlight to be peach. And I colored everything else that was going to be peach on there. And now I'm going to move on to the little tiny flowers. And these are, Dawn has drawn them like, almost like pinwheels, where one petal is tucked behind the next. So when I'm doing my shading, I'm trying to keep the dominant portion of the shading to one side, whatever side is coming out from the petal that's on top of it. And that leaves a natural highlight on the other side, so each petal is defined, versus if you just did all dark from the center, then you can start to lose that definition because I am A, using such dark colors, and B, it is such a small flower. So just try paying attention to what's laying on top of what and where to leave that highlight. If something's on top of something else, it will automatically have the highlight. And then again, I just went ahead and colored all of the little blue flowers. And actually, from just my choice of the way I stamped it, there weren't that many. And then I'm going to go in with some yellow greens and do some leaves. There is the blue flowers, there's the ranunculus, and then there's the berries in the set. And they all have different leaves. So I didn't want them all to be the same. So I opted to do the smaller leaves, and then later on some of the larger, the longer, skinnier petals, this yellow-green. And I'm coloring these the same way that I colored the smaller flowers. I'm trying to pay attention to what leaves are on top. I'm trying to pay attention to what they come out from under. So any leaves that are sticking out from the flowers, they're going to be darker at the base and lighter at the tips. Any leaves that are laying on top of each other, they're going to be darker where those leaves are connected, and the leaf on top will be lighter. And again, I did 2 layers, just like my preference is. And I did this color for the smaller flower leaves and the the berries. Are they holly berries? Probably not. They're probably just regular berries. And then I also wanted to incorporate some more blue leaves. And I picked out these colors, and then I started coloring my leaves. And once again, you're paying attention to that highlight, paying attention to what lays on top of what. And after all was said and done, I really love this color. I think that it's like a dark sea foam. It's like it's just a really pretty like teal color, but it's got more of a gray base. It's not as bright as some of the other colors that I'm used to using. And I think that it's beautiful. But remember how I told you when I started, I Googled and was trying to look for color combination that I liked. This was really, at the end of the day, that the blue that was in these leaves was competing with that bright blue of the smaller flowers. And I wasn't really digging it. But I also, as you can see, we are very far along in this coloring process. I wasn't starting again. And here's the wonderful things about Copics being translucent. When you layer Copics on top of each other, they mix together. This is one of the reasons why we love them, right? Well, it also leaves whatever your top color is as your dominant color. So after I went through and did all of the shading in these teals, I felt like it was too blue and I wanted to add some more green. So I went and looked at my hex chart and I picked a green that I thought was going to work with it, and I just layered it. It was the same kind of depth and tone as the colors that was already there. And I just layered one layer over top of all of the leaves. And that added just enough yellow to tone down that blue. And I felt like the bright blue flowers really popped more. There wasn't as much competition. So if you try a color combination and it turns out something to be too bright or not bright enough, try combining it with another color and seeing if you can save your piece before you just give it all up. Here, I wanted to color these longer leaves, the same yellow-green color. I just did it a little differently. I kept the shading all to one side. And leaves, there's really no wrong way to color them because leaves come all different ways in nature. So you can do, from the base or from the top, from the left to the right, from the center. It's just going to give you, depending upon what kind of look you're going for. At this point, all of the coloring is done. And the card was beautiful as is, but I wanted to take it just one step farther, so I decided to add a shadow. To add my shadow, I'm using my cool grays. This is C5, and then I blended it out with a C3 and a C1. I didn't show you the whole thing because it's kind of time consuming, and really it's just me doing the same thing over and over again. I did my shading as if my light source was in the top right hand corner, so that all of my shading would be in the bottom left. If you want to add a shadow to something and you're not sure exactly how it should go, look at something in real life. Like take your desk lamp and shine it in a way that will cast the shadow that you're looking for. Here I'm going back in with a BG11, and it's a very light, like aqua teal color. And this is because I wanted it to have a little bit of a background. Again, this is the wonderful thing about Copics being translucent, because I already put that gray down. I'm not going to lose any of my shading, and I can add in this BG11 on top of it, and it's going to give the appearance of being blue versus gray. So I did outline everything with the BG11, all, not just the shaded areas, but the opposite sides of that. Everything got an outline so that it appeared to be more of a background. And then once that was done, I wanted to go back in and add some highlights with my white gel pen, and I added it to the berries. And then I also, when I was coloring those blue flowers, I found it very difficult to save the centers, just with the shading and how tiny they were. So I'm just adding back in the centers with my white gel pen, and it works fine. From here, I outline all of my images. This is just a personal preference. It's not anything that you have to do. I just enjoy a bold black outline. Plus, it helps me fix up any boo-boos where I went out of lines, or something didn't stamp right. So I went ahead and outlined everything, all of the stamped image portion. I didn't do my sentiment. There was no need. That pure color black ink is bold enough. So I wanted to mount this on a navy blue card, but I wanted like a little strip of peach. I didn't have anything that matched, so I'm just going to use one of the Copic markers that I had previously used to color a strip of white, and then trim that out. And I'll go ahead and glue everything together using Tombow Mono Multi Glue. It is a liquid glue, and it gives you a little bit of playtime to scooch everything around. So that's one of my, that's my go-to adhesive. I really don't use too much of anything else. To get this strip down, I just press the nozzle of the glue right up against the card that's already glued down, and then just slide it right on down. I wanted to add some shimmer, no big shock there, because I think everything should have shimmer, and I did coat everything. I coated all of the flowers and the berries and everything so that they would be super nice and shimmery. And then that's basically the whole card. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that if you are not watching on the W+9 blog, if you're watching on YouTube, that you'll hop over and check out the rest of the weeks, because there are so many wonderful sets in this release. You don't want to miss a thing. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you later. Bye.